Well, hello there, and welcome to the Sprinklr Coffee Club. I'm your host, Marshall Kirkpatrick. Usually we do Coffee Club here on Thursdays, but this week we have drank so much coffee, we're doing it on Wednesday. And we have a very special guest that I am so excited to introduce you to. Our guest today cut his teeth in the marketing world at Procter & Gamble with an 8-year stint there, then went and led a variety of really innovative, interesting startups, shifted over to an 11-year leadership role at Microsoft, including 5 years at what I think is the coolest part of Microsoft, probably Microsoft Research. And now he is today the Chief Experience and Marketing Officer at Sprinklr. Grad Conn, I am so glad to welcome you here to the Sprinklr Coffee Club.
Hey, Marshall, I can't believe I'm actually here finally. I'm so excited. I always wanted to be on Coffee Club. I couldn't figure out how to get on. It was so tough.
You just got to talk to the right people, Grad. And now here you are. You've figured it out. And we're so glad that we were able to find some time on your schedule and hear directly from you about all the lessons you've been learning in your travels around the world, working with so many of the largest companies in the world, some of the most innovative and interesting companies in the world. I love to talk to you on a personal basis and privately behind the walls of Sprinklr. But you've got so many great stories to tell. I'm excited to get to share some of those with the Coffee Club community. Folks, if you would like to participate in the conversation today, I want to encourage you to, especially if you're on YouTube, jump into the comments field there and ask your questions. We'll bring them right into the conversation with Grad. I'm sure he would love to speak to them. And thanks for joining us. So Grad, let's get to the heart of the matter here. We talk about something called customer experience management a lot. And it's not just us. It's a really hot topic, it seems, but it's near and dear to our heart. I know that you spend a lot of time thinking about it. What does it mean to you, and why now?
I thought this show was about coffee. I don't know what you mean by customer experience management.
Fair question.
I'm here. I'm prepared to talk about coffee, though. I mean, I've got a top pot mug here. Actually in Seattle right now. You can see my Glassy Baby collection behind me over here. This is my top pot, if you can sort of see that. It's very cool. Hand-forged donuts. I can attest that they are definitely hand-forged. That's delicious.
That's the way to do it, Grad.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was here to do today. I thought, when you say
right on. So here at Sprinklr Coffee Club, we do talk about coffee.
I'll get down to
we talk about coffee.
Okay.
We talk about customer experience. We talk about digital transformation. We talk about changing the world. We talk about all kinds of things. And we try to talk about a lot in just 30 minutes. And sometimes I can get a little overly serious about the conversation. So thanks for bringing it back to the human level, Brad.
And coffee is a great example of experience, right? I mean, for so many years, a cup of coffee was a dime, and then a cup of coffee was like a nickel or a quarter, and then but it was never thought of as a product that could command a really high premium. And then Starbucks came along and really revolutionized it. And I remember people joking, who's going to pay $4 for a cup of coffee? Oh, we long for the days of the $4 coffee. And it's what they've done is they create an experience around it. And the coffee is really part of a ritual. It's part of how you start your day. It's part of how you think about, what's going to happen that day. And, delivered correctly, you have a great day. And delivered incorrectly, your day's off. So experience is part of everything we do. And experience is, often referred to as the new brand. So I think that is, to me, where most companies are going. I would say that it's very tightly tied to the concept of customer centricity. And companies that don't focus on the customer's needs will likely not be companies in a decade, certainly in 20 years. And I'd say that all CEOs over the next decade will be customer experience or customer-centric focused CEOs. And that'll be how they drive the company. I mean, if you're just to boil Amazon's success down to one thing, it's this massive, almost over-the-top customer obsession that they have as a company. And it's not just a slogan, it's the way they operate, the way where they wear pagers if something goes wrong, they're getting paged in a string. It's the way that they operate every day, the way they deliver, the way they think about everything that they do, the way they engineer all their systems. And so that's going to have to be the way all companies operate in the future. For me, what's interesting on CXM is that it's an emerging category, and I think has been mislabeled or mischaracterized for a while. So there's a specific category called CFM, and that's customer feedback management. And there are some companies in that space who have been calling themselves CXM companies, but they're really just feedback companies. They're really essentially survey companies. And they're not even M, really. They're really just customer feedback, because they don't have the ability to actually do anything about the feedback beyond reporting on it. And what you're seeing is leading analyst firms are rapidly changing their point of view, and they're like, CFM or CF is important and is necessary, but you also have to pull in the unsolicited and unstructured data that comes off modern channels, off forums like Reddit, off all the review sites, Amazon, Walmart, Yelp, off all the news sites that are out there, off all the blogs that are out there, and also off the messaging platforms and the social platforms. So that's about 500 million different sources that need to be looked at, and there's all unstructured and unsolicited. And so being able to pull that in, and then importantly, when you see someone make a comment, react to it and deal with it and manage it, the M in CXM, then I think you've really got CXM. And that's something that Sprinklr's been building from day one. And that's always been Raji's vision from when he started the company a little over 10 years ago. And that's what we do every single day. And that's what we say is, we listen, we learn, and then we love the customer back.
That's fantastic. And why do you think it is that so many other businesses are taking this more seriously today than they have in the past? I'm so glad that that's the case. A world where business isn't customer centric is ironically, what a shame. So what a great turn for the better that we're seeing. But why now?
Well, many things only happen when they're forced. And when I started at Procter & Gamble, I worked at Procter & Gamble in the 90s, we didn't think of ourselves as not customer centric. Like we weren't walking around saying, who cares about the customer? I think we thought of ourselves as very customer centric. We would do focus groups every single Friday with Nielsen. We were doing home visits. We would watch people do their laundry, which is sort of weird. As weird as that sounds, it's weird. We would constantly do customer research. We had all sorts of quant studies and qualitative studies. We did all sorts of mall intercepts. Like I felt that I was very customer centric. So and that's a few years ago. And I would say that many companies back then and even now will have a slogan about the customer's number one and customer comes first, and always listen to what the customer says. So I'm not sure that customer first is a brand new idea. What's different is that the customer has changed. And so the change the customers had is that the customer, because of modern channels, is now connected to other people. And so most customers now trust essentially the word of strangers more than they trust the word of a brand. And so the dynamic that's changed is that brands no longer control their story because their story is being told by others. And they've moved from a broadcast world where they'll just blast out, we're the better tire maker, into a world where they have to have conversations with people who may or may not believe that they're a better tire maker. I had a very interesting experience just a few days ago. I travel a fair amount, about more than 300,000 miles a year. And my very reliable Bose headphones finally started giving up the ghost, and they've been amazing. I've had them for, I don't know, a long, long time, probably good solid 8 years. They've been great, but they just were literally falling apart. And so I went to just go buy the new Bose headphones, right? I just figured I'm going to get the 35. It's the new model. I think actually the new model is a 700. I'll just go buy a set of 700s. But of course, I read the reviews, and they were not good. They were terrible. And they were terrible about specific things that are important to me. And I read a lot of them because, like, some people you discount, like, you know how you kind of read reviews, right? So you're kind of like, yeah, that person seems like they got to be in their bond. But over and over and over again, people were making similar comments about an issue that would have been a problem for me. And I was like, wow, maybe not. And if you notice, I'm wearing a new pair of Sony MX1000s who had great reviews. And you can see Sony moderating inside there too. So there was some Sony participation, and very happy with them. I've only used them on one trip, but it was across the country, and it worked out very well. And now I'm doing Coffee Club with them, which I've never been able to do with my headphones before. So it's like, it's fascinating how I did need to have brand awareness and some brand desire. So broadcast still plays a role there, but my decision was made using modern channels and essentially unstructured, unsolicited data from strangers that I'll never meet. And I made a reasonably large purchase decision, $400 purchase decision, and very, very happy with it. And I feel very comfortable that I made the decision with a lot of insight. And so this lack of control, which a lot of brands are really struggling with, has made the need for amazing customer experiences really stark. The other thing that's happened is that there are a number of new companies sort of born in modern channels, born in the cloud, born in the internet age, who from day one have architected their application, solution, product, whatever that is, with a very customer-centric view. And so you'll see legacy players who are plagued by internal silos and sort of legacy systems that are traditional models, broadcast models, being essentially outmaneuvered by companies that never bothered building that old infrastructure, and they built modern infrastructure. And with that modern infrastructure are, disaggregating what that they had built over many years. And this is this sort of disruptive innovation. It would be what Clay Christensen calls it. This disruptive innovation is real. And so, like Honeywell, who at Honeywell 5 years ago would have ever suspected their major competitor would be Google today? It never was on a single strategy document. They never crossed their minds. That's who they're being, pressured by now, is Google with Nest. So this is kind of, the world is a combination of customers having changed their behavior and habits because they live in a networked world and an always on world and an always with you world, and a bunch of companies who've taken advantage of that, who are now doing things in new and different ways that it's a little bit more difficult to compete with if you're a legacy player.
Mm-hmm. That's a really cool story about you as a customer and how your life is changing and how that's reflected in your relationship with these brands. I wonder, given your travels all around the world, meeting with many Sprinklr customers, I bet you've got a pretty steady flow of favorite stories that you have heard around the world that you like to share with others to illustrate why it is you're here and what's possible. What are some of your favorite stories right now?
About coffee?
Yes, Grad. Yeah, if you've got favorite coffee stories, you draw those connections. I'll be impressed. That's great.
What do you drink there, Marshall? What do you got in your cup right now? What are you drinking?
I'm drinking the finest coffee that the Sprinklr office has to offer.
It's pretty fun.
We've always got it on tap.
It comes
here
out
in the
whip.
Sprinklr
Yeah, there's a
Portland
whip
office.
function now, right? There's a button you can whip it now, which is pretty cool. I like that a lot. And actually, it is kind of amazing. Wherever you go, they have their own coffee, right? Like, it's fascinating to me that everyone around the world basically eats the same food, but they've structured it just slightly differently enough so it becomes like local. right? But everyone's essentially drinking coffee and or tea, but something filtered through a thing, and liquid that's colored and heated. Everyone's got a starch pod. In Poland they're called pierogi, and they're called wontons in China, and they're called. Everyone's got a different starch pod, but they're all essentially starch pods. I love that about humans. I love how we are the same, but love to be different. Okay, so let's talk about some customer stories. The first one actually, and this is I didn't go very far afield to get this one, but I just love this one because it's just so kind of orthogonal to the way you might think about it normally, which is Rust-Oleum. It's a Chicago company. Rust-Oleum is a paint company, one of the world's oldest and greatest paint companies. Rust-Oleum actually makes the paint that's used to paint the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. So if you ever notice that bridge, it's got an undercarriage, and the undercarriage rotates across the bridge back and forth, and they essentially paint the bridge all the way across. And when they get to the other end, they paint it again. So it's continuously being painted, all by Rust-Oleum paint. And they have many, many, many different paint varieties. And I was meeting with the CMO. We were having dinner, and she had this whole set of great stories. She said, Sprinklr helps me in 100 different ways. I couldn't even do my job without it. And I said, well, tell me more. And she said, well, for example, in the paint business, color is really important. And color is fashion. And the color fashions have been changing faster and faster because in a networked world, color fashion is shared more rapidly, but also goes out of favor more rapidly. So what's happening is there was getting more difficult for them to catch up to the color trend. And by the time they kind of catch up, then they'd moved on to something else, and they were starting to stockpile colors that were no longer in fashion. And so what they do is they actually use Sprinklr to see emerging color trends with influencers, and then they use that to then produce the colors, so they're always right on trend. And we have a lot of customers who do this. They use Sprinklr to get almost like an early warning system. And Dell does this as well with their computers. They can actually see any issues that are emerging on a PC that they ship. They can quickly tell if it's the OS, which is a different company, or themselves. That's something that they control. They can go in and do firmware updates, changes in the production line, get to those customers and avoid the returns and even the customer service calls before they occur. So they've made a dramatic change in the way they run their business. So coming back to Rust-Oleum, so the other thing they have, which is a really unique problem, but a really interesting problem, but not necessarily unique. So their interesting problem is that they have a lot of SKUs. Like hundreds of different kinds of paint. And they don't obviously have enough ad budget to run a campaign for each line of paint. Makes sense, right? And that's true in many companies. They have lots of different lines of products, but they can't advertise all those products, and they just end up kind of sitting around or becoming orphan products. And so they invented a thing called sparkle paint, right? Kind of cool. Put it on the wall, it sparkles. Who doesn't like sparkles? Well, a lot of people don't like sparkles, but a lot of people really like sparkles. And what it turns out is that people who really like sparkles actually have sparkle boards on Pinterest. They talk about sparkles. They got photos on Instagram. Like, it's something that they celebrate. And so they had shipped the sparkle paint, but because nobody even knew that it was even a thing or that it even existed, there wasn't really a lot of demand. It wasn't really flying off the shelves. So what they did is they used Sprinklr. They identified sparkle fanatics and then said to them, hey, would you like sparkle paint? Because we have sparkle paint. And I'm like, wow. And off they went. They're selling lots of sparkle paint now. And they've done this over and over. There's this tub and tile paint that can reglaze your tub, and no one even knew that would be a thing you could do. And so they go to people doing bathroom renovations. Hey, there's this thing that solves your problem. Wow, that's amazing. Flies off the shelves. And so this idea of micro marketing is something I think that Rust-Oleum is innovating and pioneering on. And I love the fact that a really old-fashioned, old line, essentially chemical company, about as traditional as you're going to get, is using these very modern techniques of marketing to create competitive advantage for themselves. One of my other favorite stories is McDonald's, which is another Chicago company. And McDonald's has been a great Sprinklr customer for a long time. And what they've done is they actually use Sprinklr to identify food desires. And what they noticed is a lot of people saying things like, I would love some pancakes this afternoon, or I'm super hungover and I really need an Egg McMuffin. Or, oh man, why can't I get hash browns with my Big Mac? And so they saw a lot of these coming through. And so the idea of all day breakfast came out of that through this Sprinklr research. And so then they basically took that and then went to management and were able to dimensionalize the level of demand. And more importantly, also say these are the items that people are looking for, because they don't serve all breakfast. The griddles don't get served all day, right? So they don't serve all breakfast items all day. So it's certain items that they serve. And then what they did, which I thought was really powerful, and this goes back to my earlier comment about CXM, is that they essentially got the unsolicited, unstructured feedback. So they listened. They learned from it by being able to, obviously we're very sophisticated AI platforms. So they're able to sort of dimensionalize it and show it to management, make decisions about the product mix. But then the love part, which is the action, is they're able to go back in to those people, like the actual person who said, I really feel like pancakes this afternoon. And it was sometimes years later. So it would be like, maybe I did that post, right? And then McDonald's would say, this post from November 16th, 2000 and 17, we've got your pancakes now. And the impact of that is incredibly powerful. I would say that we're still, for a few more years, customers are so used to not being listened to that when you demonstrate that you're listening to them and actually delivering product based on what they've said, it is mind-blowing. And what they do is they then retweet it, talk to their friends about it. It became a top trending topic on Twitter. That got picked up by the major news media, became a big PR story. And that whole launch was done with PR and earned media and Sprinklr, and generated billions of dollars in value for McDonald's. And so whenever someone asks me, what does Sprinklr do? I'm always like, understand your customer better, be able to talk to management and dimensionalize it in an intelligent way, which is often the problem with customer feedback. It's just anecdotal. This way you can actually group it, and then be able to actually act on it with the people who've talked to you, address their needs. That creates amplification. And I don't know of a tool that's ever been like that in marketing. It's, Mark Pritchard had an amazing speech last year at the Cannes Lions. And in that speech, he introduced this concept of mass one-on-one. And that's truly what we're doing, which is allowing one-on-one connections between brands and customers, but on a mass basis.
Mm-hmm. Grad, you've used the word networked in a couple of different contexts here, and talked about living in a networked world. That feels inspiring to me. Will you tell us what you mean by that, what that means to you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. What does networked mean to me? Huh. Well, it's just all the stuff with COVID-19 or the coronavirus is an interesting illustration of what kind of world we live in today. I prefer COVID-19 because it sounds way more sinister. It sounds like the title of a science fiction movie. Coronavirus sounds too tame. And I'm in Seattle, where it's kind of like ground zero for this thing right now. There's like most of the cases right now in the US are within a few miles of where I am right now. Very exciting. And the stores are emptied. The streets are empty. There's no one on the highway. The airport was literally, there were parts of the airport I was walking through when I arrived this morning I was the only person in the airport. And so it's kind of interesting. And what's fascinating is that if this had happened a decade ago, or imagine 20 years ago, I'm not sure people would have been able to pull out of life the way they are right now. But what's happening is, because we are able to connect to each other with very high quality video from a number of different sources, we've all got connections in our pockets, we've all got things that we use. You can still do your work. You can still learn. You can still go to school. You can still do a lot of things that normally required physical location. And so I think the response to this particular bit of public hysteria is almost amplified because the tools that we have to stay connected and stay talking to each other and still do what we need to do are available, and they didn't used to be. And so that to me is an interesting example of networked, where we're actually, people often criticize people on their phones. They're like, oh, you're just on your phone all day long. And I'm like, are they just on their phone? I mean, is that really what they're doing? Or are they talking to friends? Are they connecting with their family? Are they having conversations with their coworkers? And that's really what's happening. And this thing where people bemoan everyone on the subway all staring at their screens, I think it's amazing. I mean, I never talk to strangers on the subway. I've been taking subways for like since my 20s. Okay. I never talked to strangers. I just sat there staring into space. Now I can talk to friends on my phone and ignore the weird people around me, just like I always have. And I think there's a misconception about this connectivity, because the connectivity is so much broader. We can now stay connected to people that we used to lose touch with in the past. So I think we live in a wonderful world that way.
Yeah. You think I'm alienated, but I'm really just overcoming Dunbar's number and
Yeah, maybe
actively
talking to someone you
cultivating.
love, or yeah, someone you love, someone you want to stay connected to, a friend. Maybe something happened to somebody that they need some help. You're helping them, like all sorts of stuff, and that was really hard to do in a non-network world.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. Grad, if you've got a few more minutes, I'd like to ask
I
you
do.
about the love part of that equation, and specifically as we are uh, here at the Sprinklr Coffee Club, I'd love to get your thoughts on how companies can take their customer care, their customer engagement, and take it up to the next level from this previous era, as you described, when everything was broadcast focused. It was less centered on the modern customer and their communications. These days, customers' complaints and needs and problems are loud and clear, front and center, and brands have an opportunity to help solve those problems. But there is a challenge in shifting that work from being a cost center, as it traditionally has been when people called on the phone with problems and you'd want to get them off the phone as fast as you can, to now this opportunity to really engage with those customers and their problems in a way that drives entirely new strategic value and opportunities. I know I talk to companies all the time that aspire to do that are working on it. It's a work in progress, but it's easier said than done. And I wonder if you could offer some words of wisdom for companies seeking to go through that transformation into a place where customer care is really strategic.
Right. And I'm not sure it's not strategic right now. I think that the core issue is the way that customer care is measured and managed. So it's quite fascinating, actually. I was on the campus of a customer of ours. I can't really say the name of the customer because they would probably not want me to use their name in this context. But let's just say it was a really, really famous company, and we were on their campus, and it was sort of series of 3, 4 story buildings, the usual suspects. And my host stopped me for a second, and we were kind of going to the company store, and he stopped me. He said, "Just wanted to show you something funny here." I said, "Great." And he said, "Just look to your left." And I did. And he said, "In that building, there are several hundred people whose job it is to get customers off the phone as fast as possible." Okay. Because they're measured on time of call, TOC. That's our customer service, customer care department. I'm like, great. He goes, don't move. He goes, just turn your head a little bit to the right. I'm like, okay, good. He goes, like, see this other building? It's kind of the same building, but like mirrored opposite side of the road. He goes, in that building, there are hundreds of employees spending millions, maybe tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to get pretty much the same customers to talk to us. Okay. What's wrong with this picture? And it is a fascinating disconnect. And I think because they tend to roll up to different leaders, you get essentially different operational metrics and different behaviors. I think that's the first thing that's kind of a problem in most companies. The second thing is that when customer care gets a product query, which they get a lot of, about 30% of all the calls into any customer care department are product queries. Those are discarded. It's not a customer care issue. Immediately rerouted, but discarded, and not tracked. And most companies have no idea how many product leads they're turning away in their customer care department because they don't track it. I don't know what the solution is, but step one, I think, is that both marketing and customer care should report to a single leader. And I think that should be the CMO. I've not seen that happen very often or even at all. Number two, customer care needs to be thought of as a revenue center, because if you successfully solve someone's problem, they're more likely to be a repeat customer, and they're already a customer. And in almost every single industry, 50% of your next purchasers are current owners of your product. Like say at Ford, 50% of all Ford buyers already own a Ford. So you want to be like all over that. And these disconnects are all over the place. Like think about car dealerships. When you go to a car dealership and you take your car in for service, why is it so hard to get a loaner? Like I'm the person you should be like all over the test drives with, which is what a loaner is, because I'm very likely to buy a Ford again. So make sure I'm trying the new cars. Oh, I really like this car. This is really neat. I'm starting to bring my car in for service more often. Maybe it's time to trade up. Like it's just so obvious. But by separating everything, we siloed ourselves and we made ourselves less effective. I don't know if those are words of wisdom, but it's my point of view.
They are. Oh, I think that's fantastic. Grad, I hadn't heard those before, and I really like them. Speaking of things we haven't heard before, here in today's show, we've got a question from the audience. And here is that question, Grad. Oh, it's a reference to our friend Scott Brinker. Scott Brinker just finished crowdsourcing the 2020 marketing technology landscape and will announce the results in April at the Martech conference. That is, Eric, if there's a question on that, that's as far as it goes. In the,
well, actually, I do have a funny story. I do have a funny story about Scott Brinker's Martech landscape, which I'm a huge fan of. Huge fan of Scott. Huge fan of the landscape. I've used it many times in many presentations. It will go up, right? So it was 89.67 last time. It'll be probably 10 or 11,000 now. Wouldn't be surprised. But what I loved is there's also these stackies that he does at the conference where people submit their Martech stack. And I won one year when I was at Microsoft. And so we actually just submitted a few months ago the Sprinklr Martech stack that we use internally at Sprinklr to do our work. And we are shortlisted for the finalists. It got through. And the hilarity of it is the Sprinklr stack is Sprinklr. That's it. Because that's the way we got to go, everybody. This thing where we're trying to connect together a bunch of point solutions with APIs, it's bananas. It won't work. It doesn't work. Anyone who's got any sort of honesty with themselves as a marketer knows they're dropping leads all over the floor. The thing is broken all the time. You got to go to a single unified solution. That's one of the reasons I came to Sprinklr, because I realized that I had used Sprinklr at Microsoft. I was a big fan, early customer, and I knew that this was the future of marketing, and I wanted to be part of that.
It's beautiful. We're sure glad that you did. Grad, I know that my day is busy. It's made me drink coffee and be a little uptight here in this conversation. I want to learn from you and your ability to be even busier, potentially drink even more coffee than me. I don't know, more or less, and be such a comfortable, enjoyable guest here on the Sprinklr Coffee Club. We really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Marshall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I flew across the country this morning too. So
boy, are your arms tired, I bet. Grad, what's the best way for people to be in touch with you on an ongoing basis?
DM me on Twitter. So I'm at Grad Conn. I'm the only Grad Conn in the world. There is a company called Grad Conn in China who make connectors for computers. They keep trying to steal my handles, but I won't let them. But if you go there, that's not gradcon.com is not me. That's not my side hustle. It's a different group of people. But I'm Grad Conn on Facebook, Grad Conn on Twitter, Grad Conn on Instagram. I'm everywhere. But just DM me on Twitter. I'll get that and I can respond to you. Or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a really prolific LinkedIn invite acceptor and happy to sort of connect with you that way as well.
Fantastic. Well, I always feel smarter every time I talk to you, Grad. Really, really appreciate it. And we appreciate everybody's time here joining us today at the Sprinklr Coffee Club. We hope that you will press that like and subscribe button here on the show to get notifications of all of the fantastic conversations we have on the Coffee Club. And we will look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Marshall. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Grad.